Commuter plane crashes in Carroll County, and miraculously, 26 people survive. Good evening, I'm Steve Dawson. Karen Greer is on vacation. The plane went down just before 1 o'clock this afternoon. It took off from Hartsfield about 15 minutes earlier. It was headed to Gulfport, Mississippi. We have team coverage beginning with WGNX news reporter Luann Sedano, who arrived in Carroll County just moments after the crash.
The Embraer 120 commuter plane came to a crashing halt as the pilot desperately tried landing the aircraft in a rural West Georgia pasture. The ASA plane carrying 30 people took off from Hartsfield Airport early this afternoon, heading to Gulfport, Mississippi. Passengers say the plane lost an engine soon after takeoff and tried turning around, but never made it.
I just heard a loud crash, and then almost immediately I heard another loud crash.
The crash happened on Paul Butler's property. He was home at the time and ran out to a horrifying scene of a plane in flames and people running everywhere.
They was taking off in every direction. Yeah, like I said, probably in shock. I don't know, but some went down in the woods this way, some went over that way. A lot of them were burned. All I saw were burned, and they were in a lot of pain.
When emergency crews arrived, the plane was engulfed in flames. Crews worked to pull passengers out of the aircraft and out of the woods.
We had some running out to meet rescuers, some walking. We found some of the victims in the edge of the woods, in the wood line.
Passengers told police the pilot had been trying to make an emergency landing in the open field. After clipping some trees, the plane careened down to the ground, breaking into 3 pieces. Many say the pilot is indeed a hero, doing all he could to save his passengers.
We really thought we would have a lot more fatalities than we did, and it's just a miracle. The pilot did an excellent job of putting this plane down.
Of those 20, that was Luann Sedano reporting, of those 26 passengers who did survive, many of them had to be rushed to hospitals as far away as Birmingham and here in Atlanta. One of the places they were taken near Carrollton is Tanner Medical Center. Letitia Mile reports on how the hospital handled that effort.
Black Hawk helicopters and ambulances descended on Tanner Medical Center with the victims.
They were pretty much serious, except for maybe 4 to 5 patients. The rest of them were extremely serious.
The most serious were transferred to hospitals in Atlanta and Alabama for treatment.
Most of them's extent were 70 to 80% burns, mostly 2nd to 3rd degree burns.
Very chaotic. Again, we were very proud. We had a good turnout from our medical staff there working to take care of the injured. We were in constant contact with Grady Hospital. We appreciate the coordination we received.
By late afternoon, 6 crash victims remained at Tanner. 1 survivor was treated and released. Hospital officials credit quick work and quality medical care as reasons why so many patients are out of danger.
2.
And just a moment ago, they did pull one of the 2 bodies from the wreckage, and unfortunately, we have another bit of sad news for you. We learned that an elderly female passenger has died from her injuries. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Letitia. That does bring the death count from that wreckage to 3, as we reported just moments ago. Much of the rescue effort for the crash survivors was coordinated at Atlanta's Georgia Baptist Hospital. And we continue our team report tonight with WGNX News reporter Cheryl Case, who is standing by live there. Cheryl?
Steve, we've seen several of the patients airlifted here to Georgia Baptist Hospital by life flight, then transported by ambulance to other area hospitals, including Grady Hospital. I can tell you, after seeing these patients firsthand as they've been wheeled in, it appears to be a true miracle that they survived the crash at all. But now the families of the victims will have to count on another miracle because many of the victims are in critical condition.
You got 3 patients and 2 birds.
The call came in just before 1:30, and Life Flight dispatch was in the air seconds later.
What about Fulton County Airport? Were you getting any of that?
Georgia Baptist Hospital served as command center, coordinating a massive rescue mission involving 3 states. More than a dozen badly burned victims were airlifted to hospitals in Atlanta, Birmingham, and Chattanooga.
The folks out there did a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job.
Though it is a miracle so many people survived, there is a growing fear tonight the death toll will rise because many of the crash victims are listed in critical condition.
What is someone's chances of surviving something like that?
Totally dependent upon the immediate care that they receive and also the thickness of the burns. You're going to have to, take particular care of the patient's temperature as well as making sure that the patient's not infected.
And so tonight it is simply touch and go, wait and see. Everyone hoping that the victims who managed to get out of the aircraft alive will, of course, survive tonight. Sadly and ironically, the woman who passed away from her injuries, we believe her husband is here at Georgia Baptist Hospital tonight recovering from his injuries. Back to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Officials at Atlanta-based Atlantic Southeast Airlines have not released a statement at this point, now 6 hours after the crash. We checked the concourse at Hartsfield, and WGNX News reporter Martha Sharon is in the newsroom with that part of the story. Martha?
Prime time. Tonight on Channel 5 Eyewitness News Prime Time.
An ASA commuter plane crashes in a hayfield in Carroll County. Flight 7529 was flying out of Hartsfield bound for Gulfport, Mississippi, when it fell out of the sky, breaking into 3 pieces. A survivor describes the end of that fateful flight.
I opened my eyes and saw that, hey, I'm alive and the plane is in pieces and I'm hanging by my seat belt.
Fellow passengers, firefighters, volunteer rescue workers, and neighbors helped pull dozens of people to safety.
I told them just to lay still, and someone was asking me if I would call their wife or husband, and so I told them that I would.
Helicopters and ambulances ferried the injured to hospitals in Carroll County and Atlanta.
I think that it's too early to tell on all of them. Obviously, things evolve. All of the patients at this point would be considered critically ill.
As doctors went to work on the injured, investigators began probing the wreckage of the plane, looking for the cause of today's crash. And this evening, we heard from Atlantic Southeast Airlines.
It's a difficult thing to go through, but our immediate need right now is to try to help the families.
Tonight we have live team coverage of the Carroll County plane crash. Channel 5's Tana Bracken reports from the crash site. Lisa Raham has the 911 tapes from the neighborhood. Doug Richards has the story of passengers who managed to walk away. And Jim Kazurski tells us how to survive a plane crash.
Dedicated, determined, dependable. For Monday, August 21st, 1995. This is Channel 5 Eyewitness News Prime Time. Now, Channel 5 news anchor Russ Spencer.
Good evening. Brenda Wood is off tonight. We begin with the story of ASA Flight 7529. Just before that deadly crash, the pilot radioed the tower he was having engine problems. Minutes later, the pilot was dead, but most passengers survived. It's too early to be sure, but there are reports tonight the pilot's last-minute actions may have saved those lives. It all began shortly before 1 this afternoon. Flight 7529 was about 15 minutes out of Atlanta en route to Mississippi when it crashed and burned in Carroll County near the Alabama line. We have team coverage of the crash and its aftermath. We begin with Channel 5's Tana Bracken. Tana?
I've seen a few plane crashes. I'm retired Air Force, but nothing compared with this.
What he saw through his window terrified him. Just 100 yards away, the plane skidded to a stop, broke into 2, and burst into flames.
But people was coming out of the plane, and some of them was on fire. And I ran up, and probably 5 or 6 feet from the nose, maybe 10 feet from the nose of the airplane, there was a gentleman laid down with he was burned pretty bad, and had a gash in the side of his head and was bleeding pretty severely. And I told him I thought he might ought to get up. It was pretty close to the airplane. I really expected the tanks to explode.
Everybody that got out smelled like jet fuel, you know. And they were all that I saw were burnt pretty good.
NTSB and FAA investigators searched the wreckage for clues while rescuers used a hatchet to get to the pilot's body. He died in the cockpit. Today, rescue workers praised his efforts to land what appeared to be a crippled plane. Amazed more didn't die.
The crew did an excellent job setting the plane down in this field. He didn't have enough field or a good terrain to land the plane on. He did an excellent job.
The pilot had radioed in he was having engine trouble. Passengers told their rescuers the right engine failed. As the pilot attempted to land, he clipped treetops. Tonight, rescuers say there were many heroes here today.
As a matter of fact, one of the first people to pull a line off the truck was a passenger on the plane. He was an airman fresh out of school, and he was the first one to pull a nozzle off the fire truck, so he was really a hero, and he had been pulling people out of the plane before we got on the scene.
That was Tana Bracken reporting from Carroll County tonight. Now, ASA is sending its own team of investigators to Carrollton to help the National Transportation Safety Board figure out what caused that accident. It was ASA's second deadly crash in just 4 years. Channel 5's Melissa Jew is in College Park at ASA headquarters, where company executives tonight defended their safety record. Melissa?
Russ, Atlantic Southeast Airlines has been in business for 16 years. They operate more than 600 flights a day. And while this is their second crash in 4 years, executives maintain they're a safe airline. Atlantic Southeast Airlines has a fleet of 60 Embraer 120 airplanes like the one that crashed near Carrollton. Company executives say that aircraft recently passed a major FAA safety inspection with a perfect score.
If we didn't think the airplane was safe to be in the air, we would never dispatch a flight with that airplane. The airplane has a very good safety record.
Flight 7529's pilot reported engine trouble before going down. So far, investigators don't know the cause of the crash, but ASA says the pilot was experienced. He was one of 3 people who died.
This captain on the airplane had approximately 10,000 hours, a very experienced captain with us, and has an exemplary record with us. So there's no thought whatsoever that there's any crew involvement in that. We're a good crew with it.
ASA operates 628 flights a day at its Atlanta and Dallas hubs. The airline reported minor disruptions in service after the crash, but executives want to reassure passengers that it's safe to fly Atlantic Southeast.
We run a safe airline, and I'm sure there might be some concern, as there always is following an accident, but we won't put an airplane into the air unless we think it's safe, and we'll continue to operate in that mode.
Now ASA has assigned 1 employee to every family of a crash victim to make sure they get what they need, to make sure they get into Atlanta and down to Carrollton, and to make sure they have hotel accommodations. ASA executives say that is their main priority right now. Reporting live from College Park, Melissa Jew, Channel 5 Eyewitness News, prime time.
Now, Melissa, are all of ASA's airplanes that Embraer 120, that very same plane?
No, they have 60 of those Embraer 120s. They have 20 other planes, ATRs, and they also have 12 10-seaters for a total fleet of 82.
All right. Melissa, thanks very much. Well, news of today's crash quickly reached Hartsfield Airport, where many travelers waited to board other ASA flights out of Atlanta. Most passengers we talked with today seemed to take news of the crash in stride, and even among those who were unnerved, none was anxious enough to change travel plans.
This is my first commuter flight this year. I've stuck to jets, so I'm taking a chance.
Nervous?
Now I am.
I fly all the time. I think, generally speaking, airplanes are very reliable. Sometimes there's accidents. Sometimes things fail. Sometimes pilots make mistakes. But I'd still rather fly than drive that distance.
Now, hundreds of people fly into and out of Atlanta on ASA flights on the same runway used by Flight 7529. Now, most of those injured and killed in this crash today died not in the crash itself, but in the fire that came afterward. Now, our Tom Corvin is live downtown now with the conditions of those who went to Grady Hospital to be treated for those burns. Tom?
Russ, Grady's burn unit is considered tops in the metro Atlanta area. This is where 8 of the plane crash survivors are tonight, all in critical condition, but all still very much alive. Much of that thanks to both paramedics and doctors on the land and in the sky. Paramedics get the word quickly. At least 8 plane crash victims are coming into Georgia Baptist by chopper. Ambulances line up with critical time ticking on the survivors with severe burns.
The more extensive the burn and the older the patient, the longer the hospitalization will be and the more critical the patient.
Grady's burn unit gets patients one after another with little time to spare. A triage is set up to make sure they make it.
I think that it's too early to tell on all of them. Obviously, things evolve. All of the patients at this point would be considered critically ill.
Paramedics Scott McClure and Scott Cater were first on the scene.
People just wanting all the attention they could get as fast as they could get it. It was terrible. Words can't describe what it's like. You just can't describe what you see. You just have to see it.
There
was a lot of panic, a lot of confusion, but being a disaster, everyone pulled through real good, and we're real fortunate to be safe ourselves.
Cato and McClure just hope their teamwork pays off and save lives.
They said they don't really remember too much, but they remember the plane hitting the ground, breaking apart, and they come out of the plane. Before it ever burst into flames, they were out of the plane. We done the best we could with the situation we had.
We just spoke with the nursing supervisor here a few minutes ago. She tells us all 8 plane crash survivors remain in critical condition, all in ICU. Reporting live, Tom Corbin, Channel 5 Eyewitness News, prime time.
Tom, how long will it be before they have a better idea of whether these folks will survive these burns?
That is something that it's an old cliche, but only time will tell at this point, because obviously as the body reacts to burns, severe burns, it does a lot of different things, and that's what they're trying to gauge right now.
Tom Corbin, live downtown. Thanks so much. Remarkably, most of the people on board Flight 7529 today are alive tonight. Viewing the crash site, it's hard to believe some people even managed to walk away. It was a scene of horror, but it was, for the most part, a scene of survival. Channel 5's Doug Richards has talked with some of the survivors and has the